So hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time to join us today for our March webinar. My name is Megan Lebeda. I'm a program manager here at Kirkwood Corporate Training. Joining us today is Lisa Schaefer, presenting on Breaking Barriers, Mastering Tough Talks to Reduce Conflict. Lisa is an educator, counselor, college instructor, and the owner of Shine with Schaefer, LLC, a coaching and consulting business that focuses on developing leadership skills in both employees and students. Lisa graduated from the University of Wisconsin with a master's degree in counseling and a bachelor's degree in psychology. She is a founding member of the John Maxwell Leadership Team and has presented trainings to over 100 different companies in the nation. And because I love this presentation so much, I'm going to take no more time away from you, Lisa, and I'm going to pass it right over to you.
All right. I love it. Thanks so much, Megan. Hopefully everybody's doing well today. One of the biggest things when we talk about how to connect and what we're doing with people and relationships and leadership, I want to know your mindset. You know, so many times people say, well, my mindset really indicates how I interact and how I see things. Our perception becomes our reality. And when we're talking about having good conversations around conflict, we've got to look at, do I see things the way that they are? Do I see facts? Can I determine if it's a situation or if it is a problem? What am I doing? How am I doing? And what's my mindset? So my friends, how many of you woke up today and you're like, woo, we're going to be on a webinar today for 90 minutes. I'm excited. I want to, learn as much as I can. I'm feeling like my current story is I'm doing the best I can with what I have. And man, I love being a leader. Or how many of you woke up today feeling like this dog and you're like, oh man, I'm just so tired of people. Like it's getting really hard to be a leader when we have so much conflict. There's so much bias that's out there. I'm really dreaming of moving away to an island. What is your current mindset as we talk about conflict? And what I've learned is the people who take on this mindset that I want to have an attitude of curiosity and understand why people see things differently than I do, and then come up with solutions on how we can work together effectively, even though we see things differently. This is the goal we want to get to as we continue to grow and learn together. So the thing I would ask you today is take on an attitude of curiosity. Is that your mindset? Are you thinking, yes, I am ready to learn. I'm ready to stay present. I'm ready to try to do 1% better in an area that maybe I'm doing okay in, but I just want to get better at it. Or maybe you're avoiding conflict altogether and you're thinking, today, I want to learn some tips and tricks on how to start some of these conversations. To let you know in the chat, there are some resources for you that are usually beneficial in giving people some kind of questions to ask themselves. How are you seeing conflict? Giving you some tips on how to take an attitude of inquiry and take an attitude of curiosity and learn. And then again, how to advocate and brainstorm to be able to create win-win solutions for all parties involved. There's going to be some times where we're going to have things that work. There's going to be some times where maybe we're just going to have to agree to disagree and have an impasse, but agree on things that we can take away to work together. So that Tough Talk handout will give you some tips and some resources. There's another thing. A lot of times people are like, Lisa, I don't know what to say. How do I start these conversations? What if I have to give some performance feedback to somebody that I think isn't going to take it very well? Well, there is a Tough Talk performance feedback sample script that is available for you in the chat room as well. And it just gives you kind of a chance to really focus on, hey, what can I see and how do I move that forward? So I would encourage you to, again, access those. You'll also, again, see, the resources are missing from the chat. Megan, thank you for putting those back out. Can you now see those? I'm hoping, John, again, showing those available for you. So those Tough Talk performance feedback sample script. And then the final thing you're going to see is you're going to see an actual assessment. Sometimes people are like, I just need to see where I'm at with conflict. There are different ways that we handle it. Some of us might be avoiders. Some of us might be competitors. Some of us might be harmonizers. We might be collaborators. And again, just looking at your style helps you understand, when do I have some of these conversations and when do I move forward? So it looks like Melissa is not able to see them as well. So thank you, Megan, for taking care of that and emailing those out to everyone. So Thank you for letting us know that that was not available, but Megan will be sending those out to you. You'll be receiving those 3. And again, just some resources for you to kind of help you look at what's your mindset and how are you doing and where do we need to continue to grow. What I always like to ask though is how many of you are like thinking, I'm doing pretty good with conflict because I need to say things. I need to be able to understand. One of the things that I learn in working and coaching and supporting first-time supervisors as all the way up to the CEOs is whatever we ignore, we allow. So many of us are saying, well, these are some behaviors that I can't allow. For example, safety. I got to say something if safety is concerned. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about psychological safety as well as physical safety. But I would ask you, what are you currently doing well? You know, many of us are like, oh, I hate conflict. But we need conflict to make change. So if you are addressing and having conversations around tough talks, you're doing well. If you're actually able to facilitate it. If you start out by saying, hey, it looks like you and I are on a different page. What do we need to do to work together? If you're assertive, not aggressive, assertive. Assertiveness says, hey, I really want us all to be able to work together. How many of you'd love to come to a drama-free workplace? How many of you'd love to be able to look at how you can bring your best self to work? That assertiveness gets a goal and a vision created for people. So what do you want to see? What do you want to do? And how do you communicate that vision? Are you mediating? Sometimes you may be called, and I get this a lot where sometimes people will say, you got a minute? I want to talk about Joe. Okay. Have you talked to Joe about your concerns? You know, if they've said, yes, I've talked to him, I haven't been able to work through it, then sometimes we have to step in as a mediator. As a former counselor, that's what my role was to mediate between 2 individuals who saw things very, very differently. So again, you may have a mediator on your staff, any neutral party that can come in and help set ground rules to have an effective conversation. You know, one of the biggest things in mediation is talking about your rules of engagement. I was at a company the other day, a manufacturing company, right on the back of their name cards. They actually had their rules of engagement. 1, we will dialogue with respect. 2, we will not voice derogatory or defamatory remarks to people. And one of the things I found really hilarious is their brainstorming. We will not shut down a brainstorming session by saying, we tried that 10 years ago and that didn't work. So knowing what your rules of engagement are, and sometimes that mediation process helps that. But what are you doing well? How many of you are having some empathy? Now, there's a difference between sympathy and empathy. Empathy is saying, okay, help me understand where you're coming from. That must be tough. This sounds like it's frustrating for you. What do we need to do to work through this? What do you think it's going to take and able to get to the other side of this? Empathy is being non-judgmental. And a lot of times we have a tendency to want to get judgmental because we want to tell people what we think they should do. How many of you find yourself shooting on people? Well, you should probably try this. You should do this. You should do that. Sometimes we forget the empathy piece by just paraphrasing back what you're hearing from someone. That must be tough. I can see this is frustrating. Right now, it looks like you and I are on different pages. I want us to be able to work together. Do you want to be able to work together? That empathy is essential. And then getting to the point of interviewing and then actively listening, because listening is hard on its own, but now trying to listen to somebody who you disagree with, that can be even more challenging. So that's why it becomes important to be able to really look at the questions you can ask. For example, I might say something like this: the Packers are the best football team ever to walk the face of the earth. Now, how many of you automatically want to go, the Packers? Oh my God, what is wrong with her? How many of you want to get into a judgment and say, oh gosh, she must have lost her mind somewhere. They haven't even won the Super Bowl. They keep trading quarterbacks. That's a rebirth year. Do you automatically want to make an assumption and then make a judgment? Or do you want to say, that's interesting. I wonder why she's a Packer fan. I wonder why that's important to her. I wonder if she's ever had experience in Green Bay. I wonder if her family raised her to be a Packer fan. I wonder if it's a requirement to actually have a state of Wisconsin license plate is to be a Packer fan. Do you get curious? And when we are looking at conflict and having conversations, we have to be able to get curious. Not what's wrong with them, but help me understand. Help me see that perspective. Find yourself in a room with somebody you disagree with. And do that as often as possible, because that's when you start to learn how to have tough conversations. Get with people who think differently than you and create opportunities of questions. If you're working and managing with people, bring people together and say, hey, I would love for this to happen. What do you think it's going to take? What barriers might get in the way? And you will hear people who think very differently from you, but you're starting to get into that question ask. What are we doing? What's happening? So if you have a question you love to ask, go ahead and type it in the chat. If you're thinking, man, I'm doing this really well, I really take an attitude of curiosity, and I really want to know a little bit more about why somebody might do what they're doing. I might just check in and say, hey, you know what? I noticed that you're doing it this way. Tell me a little bit about the background on this. Is this something that you've learned in the past? What can you do to ask questions, to interview, and then actively listen? The other big thing is, what are you doing well in accountability? Biggest things I'm seeing right now for conflict is people are setting expectations, but they're not holding people accountable. And there's a lot of excuses that start to happen, and those excuses cause barriers and get people into a mindset of, I'll just do it myself because I'm going to get it done right. I'll do it myself. This accountability becomes essential. And when you're trying to hold somebody accountable, one of the best ways to do it is to assign a task and then ask them, hey, when do you think you could get this to me by? What can I do to hold you accountable? Do you want me to check in with you on a weekly basis to see how things are going? Would you prefer that I basically just leave you alone? Do you want to brainstorm off of these types of things? Holding people accountable is a core piece of minimizing conflict, because right now people are saying, well, why is this fair? That's not fair. This isn't fair. I was taught that fair only comes in August in Iowa. So again, know what those barriers are. Have people talk about them ahead of time, especially if you're creating an action item. If you're having a meeting and you're asking people to walk away to do certain things, hey, how do you want us to hold you accountable? This is a hard deadline. This needs to happen because this, and this is being impacted if we don't get that on the books. So how are you doing with accountability? And then how are you in creatively problem solving? Too many times people get stuck and they can't get creative. The creativity and problem solving says, maybe we haven't tried this before, but what would it take to make it work? Here's some things we could look at. Too many times we ask the question, well, what if we fail? Switch it. What if we succeed? Look at the positives of those. So with conflict, I ask you, do you have these skills? And where are your highest skills at? You want to have a balance between all of these, because sometimes if you're too empathetic, people will say, oh, they're just a pushover. And then you might buy into a lot of excuses. Or if you're too accountable, somebody might say, oh, they're such a micromanager. What are you doing well? You want to have a balance of all of these. And the biggest thing in creating an opportunity to have conversations that might be tough is to create trust within your team so that you can give and share feedback with each other. How many of you have ever done a 360 and said, I would really like to have some feedback on how I'm doing as a leader? Do I have these skills? Do you come to me with trust? Do you feel as though I can support you? Because within 90 seconds, everybody always wants to know, can I trust you? Can you help me? And do you care about me? And if you have those 3 yeses for people, they will have a stronger rapport with you, and you'll be able to have some of those challenging conversations. Even though we know it might be hard, people will be okay to hear it because they trust you. So I would encourage you, if you truly want to know, how am I doing as a leader and what am I doing to support? Ask people, what do you see I do? What am I doing well? And ask yourself, what are you doing well? Too many times we focus on what we're not doing well, and that can generate even more conflict. I always like to ask people, give me a list of all the stuff that's working for you. And they'll be like, oh, this is really hard. I'm not sure how to do this. And then I'll say, what are all the things you want to change? They'll give me a mile-long list of all the things they want to change. But recognize your strengths, because many of you do have strengths in this area. But we've got to see, how do I see it? Because I have to have self-awareness. If you've ever taken a course in emotional intelligence, one of the biggest things we talk about in that is, am I aware of how I come across? Am I aware of how I'm being perceived? Am I aware of, again, how I am impacting the conversations? You know, if we see conflict as bad, we constantly will say, oh, I don't want to deal with this. And then our mental health gets a little bit jacked up because we're constantly having this conversation in our head about what I should be doing. And I should be talking to them. I should say something. But what if they do this? What if they do this? Sometimes I ask, what if you don't say anything? What happens? Whatever you ignore, you allow. What if you don't have that conversation? What if you don't have the opportunity to say, hey, here's what I see that's going well, and here's some things that we could do differently? What if I don't have that? What do we need to keep doing, stop doing, or start doing conversation? What if I just assume that if they think differently than me, they're just difficult? What if I blame the person and not the actual behavior? How do you see conflict? So I'd ask you, feel free to type in the chat, or again, if you want to chime in, feel free to unmute and share. How do you see conflict? Do you see it as good? Do you see it as bad? Or are you just like, that's not my problem? Are you apathetic? Where do you find yourself? Because how you see conflict will impact how you have the conversations. If you're thinking to yourself, just because they see it differently than me and I get a little bit judgmental, I might get a little bit preachy, I might try to push my values onto them, there can be an opportunity for more conflict. So take an attitude of curiosity, blame the behavior, not the person. And so when we start to see conflict, I always like to say, hey, this is an opportunity. I really want to see you get 1% better. I really want to support you in success. I want to be able to share some thoughts that we can work together to help you achieve awesomeness. I mean, wouldn't you love to come to work? And again, how do we do this? You know, I love it, Robert. Thank you. Yeah, sometimes people see it as not getting your point across. Why is this member doing this? You know, and again, that's why I always like to say, help me understand. Take that attitude of curiosity. What would it take for you to be able to do it this way? You know, Jill, you're right. Conflict is good. But again, it's that thing where you look at finding the right words. That's hard. People oftentimes tell me, Lisa, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to script this. Sometimes, again, I just start with, hey, I really want us to be able to work together more effectively. Help me understand what's going on from your perspective. It looks like you see it a little bit differently than I do. I want us to be able to come up with a solution on how we can work together so that we can achieve what we need to achieve. It's good. We have to have it. And I bet every single person on this call has a truth teller. And you have that person, no matter what, is willing to have those tough talks with you because they're thinking to themselves, I want them to be happy. I want them to be engaged. I want them to work together. So how you see conflict will definitely indicate how you handle conflict. So I like to ask, do you see a need for a tough talk here? You know, how many of you are in construction? This is, of course, when maybe a plumber and an electrician doesn't get along. Well, what do we need to do? Sometimes people are like, that's not my job. Just let it be. But, you know, we do have to have some tough conversations. My brother is in construction and he did send this picture. This actually was in a location in which he was working. He sent a picture and said, I think we need some conflict resolution strategies here. Sometimes people just get passive aggressive and people might say, well, you know what? I'm just not going to say anything to them. I'm just going to do behaviors that might torque them off. You know, we have to be able to move through that. If we don't get along, we've got to be able to have an understanding of what it's going to take for us to work together. And one of the biggest things I ask people is, as a leader, do you want to be respected or do you want to be liked? And there's times when you have to have those tough conversations because it's going to require us to be respectful. Too many times people are like, well, I don't want people to get mad. Well, people are getting mad because we aren't having the conversations. We're allowing behaviors like this, and this causes more frustration. So again, see conflict as a way to be able to problem solve and to work together. So we've got to reframe it. But in order to have a tough talk, we've got to have trust. And again, like I was saying earlier, psychological safety is becoming essential. This is again where people are like, okay, I can have a conversation. I can bring up some things that are concerning me without a fear of getting a target on my back or, having a retaliation. Many times I'll go into a company that's having some conflict and maybe they're having some culture issues. And if you're a Patrick Lencioni fan, the 5 levels of dysfunction or the 5 dysfunctional levels of a team, one of the tasks he charges people to do, and I facilitate this often, is what do we need to keep doing, stop doing, or start doing? And share with each person at the table a strength you see them bringing to the table and a behavior you wish they would do different that would help the team. So many times people are like, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I couldn't tell somebody an opportunity. I can't put down what we need to keep doing, stop doing, or start doing. What if they get mad? The last time I brought something up, I basically was not asked back to the meetings. I don't want to get fired. What if I bring something up and I get fired? If you want to be an innovative organization, and you want people to trust and be open and have dialogue so that you can continue to grow and move forward, you've got to create a psychologically safe environment, culture where it's okay to say, hey, you know what? Here's some things that I see we have some gaps in. Here's some things I see that we're doing really well, and here's how I think we could get 1% better. And if you've got a lot of fear of punishment or a fear of humiliation, or if somebody brings something up and somebody says, well, that's not right. That's not the right perspective. I think you got it all wrong. Your tone of voice in which you respond to people will impact the trust level of your team. So psychological safety is essential in having a great conversation around tough situations. If I don't feel like I can trust you, I'm not going to have the conversation with you. So many times I ask people, have you had the conversation with the person you directly have the conflict with? Well, no, because they want me to fix it. And I'll say, well, what was your role in the conflict? And they're like, what do you mean? What's my role? If we have conflict, each player has a role in the conflict. So what was your role? Was there anything that was said, that was done, that could have generated this problem a little bit more? And what do you see as a solution? And what's it going to take for you to be able to go talk to Joe? I'd like for you to go try it. Go inquire. Use things like help me understand. Or I think you and I see things differently, but I want us to be able to work together. Don't you want to be able to work together? What do we need to do? If we don't have psychological safety, you might as well forget it. These tough talks are going to get people jacked up. They're going to get emotional, and people might start to take things personal and then automatically create an enemy versus an ally mindset. When you have psychological safety, everybody on your team is an ally. It's not, oh, well, they're doing it wrong and this department does it wrong and they don't do anything. Every single person is an ally. And our goal in having these conversations is to create an environment where we can support each other all and getting 1% better. So if you're having some tough situations, I would assess and ask you to assess your psychological safety. If you're going to meetings and you're saying, bringing things up and people are like, yeah, we tried that, it didn't work, and that's just the dumbest idea. Or if you're having conversations where people are getting heated and getting angry and basically saying, well, that's not right, this isn't how it is, I don't see it this way, then we got to test for psychological safety. So here's some questions. Edmondson has done several studies on looking at how do we create an environment where people feel safe to have some dialogue. These are 7 questions that generate taking a risk with your team. And when you can take a risk, that's what a crucial conversation is. It's a risk. It's a risk of sharing my idea or my belief or my perception And the risk is, are we going to be able to move through this, or are we going to have an impasse? So if you make a mistake in your team, is it held against you? Are you able to bring up problems and tough issues? Do people on the team sometimes reject others for being different? Is it safe to take a risk? Is it difficult to ask other team members for help? Do the people on your team deliberately act to undermine your effort? Are your unique skills and talents valued and utilized? Again, these are just 7 questions to say, how safe is it to take a risk? Because difficult conversations are a risk. So I'll stop for a minute if anybody wants to chime in and share anything that you guys have done to create psychological safety so that you can have some of these tough conversations. Because rapport is essential. Is there anybody on the call today that has a best piece of advice on what you've used? So again, feel free to type into the chat, or I'm just going to pause for a minute if anybody wants to chime in on maybe some things that have worked for them. Looks like we have a chat coming in right now. Awesome. You are so spot on, Becky. Not so much what you say, it's how you deliver the message. You know, again, really looking at this idea of tone, rate, and am I getting more worked up than I need to around the scenario? People will model your emotion. So if you're having a conversation with somebody that you do disagree with, if you feel like you are getting jacked up, take a minute and take a breather. Maybe distract yourself for a minute, because that tone becomes super, super important. If people feel like they're being talked down to, they don't listen. If they feel like they're being scolded, they don't listen. There's 3 different tones that you have. There is what's called the adult tone, where it's a matter of, here's what I want to do. I want us to stay emotionally regulated during this time. I want to be able to have these conversations. That's the adult tone. The parent tone is, well, you have to, you should, you need to, you must. If you find yourself using things like you have to, you need to, you should, you must, that can be perceived as a tough parent. And you may be working with individuals who came from a family of adversity where maybe there was trauma with the parent-child relationship. And they may internalize that as being scolded, and they might get into a child voice. Well, I don't have to, I don't want to, I'm not gonna. So again, be careful not to jump in parent voice or even child voice. Stay in that adult voice. Robert, you're right. 6 is very devastating. Glad to hear that you were able to remove team members from that to create that better environment, because there are some people out there that just are like, you know what, I'm just going to wait and I'm not going to give them what they need because, you know, I don't think it's worth it. That is some serious conflict. I have seen departments that have had conflict like this. Well, don't give it too much information. They need to find it on their own. And I'm thinking to myself, well, we have a tough culture right now if you are not assisting and helping to be the best we can. So glad that you were able to move those people out, because that will certainly cause a major issue. It's funny, I got called into a situation for a mediation when one of the people, I was working at a financial, and one of the person was a mortgage processor and the other person was the actual mortgage lender. They had a major conflict for about 1.5 years. And she, the individual who was the processor, was keeping track of all the things that the mortgage lender was doing wrong. And she had an entire file folder of the day and the time in which he had all these issues. And I'm like, did you actually have a conversation with him? No, I talked to his boss about it. I'm like, well, okay, what do we have control over here? What are some things? But she got into scorekeeping. And when you get into scorekeeping, you're creating a mindset of, he's not my ally. He is my enemy. And I'm going to keep track of all the things that he did wrong. That is a serious issue. And again, that can undermine your culture really quickly. Jared, thank you. Found yourself being vulnerable, allowed your employees to open up. You're spot on. the more that you can be transparent and vulnerable with people, I mean, you don't want to over self-disclose. There are people right now that are self-disclosing way too much information. But if you're thinking to yourself, you know what, we've got change coming through. I'm a little bit nervous about this change too. What do you think we need to do to work together? Again, creating that human factor. More and more of your younger generation don't want kind of that fake it till you make it. They want a little bit of transparency. They want to know that they can see themselves in you. Also built trust in your leadership ability. Yeah, Robert, if you can get rid of the toxic, that is really important. If you can get rid of it either by getting rid of them or getting rid of the behavior. Again, I always like to change the behavior. What do you need to do? So when I was having that conversation with those two, the mortgage lender and the mortgage processor, I'm like, what are you both trying to do here? Well, we're both trying to create opportunities for somebody to get a house. Okay, so you have a common goal. Now, what's it going to take for you guys to be able to work together on this common goal? And when you make that common goal hard enough or strong enough or more important, then you can start breaking down the walls and the barriers. Do you want to have a place where you can come together and not worry about each other, keeping score on what you're going wrong? What do we need to do? So again, have those conversations, create the psychological safety, and support those people. So thank you for sharing in the chat today. If you're wondering to yourself, well, what do I say? How do I say it? Well, be present. I wonder if you can tell me a little bit more. You know, don't get into the preaching, politicking, prosecuting. Hey, this is interesting. How did you come to that conclusion? Hold neutral space. Be careful not to get too judgmental. If you want to give advice in a question. Have you ever thought about trying this, or this? Which one do you think would work for you? And then reflect back what you hear. What I'm hearing you say is you think this one would work for you. What do you think it'll take to get that done? And what can I do to support you? So if you're having tough talks and conversations with people, what do we think we need to do? What is it that needs to happen? Here's what I'm hearing you say. How can I support you in this? But again, you want them to be able to come up with the ideas that they think, I might try this. But if you're thinking to yourself and they go, I don't know. What do you think you'd try? I don't know. Have you ever thought about these three things? So now I'm giving advice without sounding preachy because I put a have you thought about in front of it, which generates in your brain a choice. And we all want choices. We don't want to be told what to do. We want to choose what we want to do. So if you want to give advice, have you thought about trying this, or this? What do you think would work? What's a plan of action you could take? What can I do to support you? That is key. Again, what do you think? Can I check what I think with what I've heard? What I think I'm hearing you say is this. Is that correct? That gives a validation that they think you're hearing them. Anytime you can paraphrase back. So Lisa, I hear you're a Green Bay Packer fan. Why, yes, I am. That sounds interesting. Tell me a little bit more about how you became a fan. Huh, I'm on a different page than you. I'm a Bear fan. Huh, well, what do we need to do to work together? Again, just creating those mindsets and those conversations help you move forward. So creating that safe environment has to happen. If we don't have a safe environment, it will be challenging to have conversations that are tough because people's egos are going to get in the way. People are going to get their defense mechanisms kicked in. People are going to get into, well, I got to make sure that I show up, that I'm competitive and that they're wrong and I'm right. And when we start to have those frustrations, conflict becomes very, very challenging. So really think of what am I doing to create psychological safety? Because conflict is any situation where your concerns differ from somebody else's, and that leads to disagreement. But it's necessary. And I always say that conflict is necessary to make change. If we don't have conflict, we don't change. And if nothing changes, we don't change. If we don't change, nothing changes. We have to have conflict to make change. And many of us will say, well, I want to increase sales. I want to increase market share. I want to lower turnover rate. I want to increase engagement. These are all things that maybe might be generating a little bit of conflict. but we have to have conflict to dialogue. What do we need to keep doing, stop doing, or start doing to make this goal? And when we do that, we have conflict around a variety of things. Facts. Right now, facts, we can have conflict around it. But I always like to use facts to say, hey, you know what? Especially if I'm doing performance reviews for somebody. Hey, I've noticed in the last month, you've had 3 days. That you've been out? Is everything okay? Facts. Hey, I've noticed that you missed 3 or 4 meetings. Is everything okay? What's going on? Help me understand what's happening. Those are facts, using your facts. A lot of times people can't go back on facts, but we have a source of conflict. I always love the weather. Everybody's like, well, we've got a 50% chance of sun today. Well, we have a 50% of chance. Is it going to be mostly sunny, or is it going to be partly cloudy? Well, 50% says it's partly cloudy, which means, well, maybe, 50% says it might be partly sunny. What are your facts? And again, be careful with those, that you get people clear on what those facts are. The other big source that I see most conflict happen is in your methods. Standard operating procedures. Why don't people do the SOPs the way they're supposed to? Again, sometimes people will find shortcuts, and then people will get frustrated because, well, that's not safe, or, this standard operating procedure is this way because. Then I ask, if you've got a lot of method issues and a lot of people that are going against standard operating procedures, then maybe you need to put in a genius hour. And people are like, what's a genius hour? Well, you give an hour a month to a pilot project of people who are doing standard operating procedures differently, and you give them a chance to create a new standard operating procedure that might be more efficient. Put them on the continuous improvement team. Again, continuous improvement is the genius hour. What do we need to, again, look at to be more effective or more efficient? If you've got a lot of people that are going against the methodology, ask, where do you see an opportunity to change this? If you've got an SOP that is non-negotiable, that's the other thing I would ask you to think about in your standards of leadership. Do you have a negotiable list, and do you have a non-negotiable list? There are methods out there that are non-negotiable. For example, if you're working in compliance, if you're working in safety, if you're working in grants, if you are working in areas where you have to do things for compliance or auditing or whatever, for safety, OSHA, then that's a non-negotiable list. Some things we just have to do because that's expected. Maybe there's some negotiable things. Maybe we could do this process a little bit differently. Maybe we could streamline this. Maybe this value stream map is going to help us be a little bit more efficient. So again, get people dialoguing around the methods. Goals. This one's huge. Whenever people totally disagree, I go back to the goals and I try to get them to a yes. How many of you would love to work in a drama-free environment? Yes. How many of you would love to come to work where you feel safe and secure to be able to be yourself and you can bring up concerns without fear of humiliation? Yes. How many of you want us to see us to continue to grow and encourage others to be successful? Yes. How many of you would like to be able to not lose people on your team so that we can stay efficient and retain people? What is your goal? We are now coming into 5 years since COVID, but I'm going to say there are some lessons in COVID that were very, very helpful in minimizing some conflict. The leaders that were establishing the goal of keeping their employees safe early had higher buy-in and less conflict. When the leaders came on and said, here's some things that I'm nervous about too, but our goal is to do this, and this is what we know for sure today, and we are going to do our best one day at a time to be successful. When you use your goal as a way to inspire, you'll get people to buy in a little bit more. So always get them back to the goal. I realize you want to do it this way. I want to do it this way, but our goal is to get here. And then the final thing that I see is a huge source of conflict, and many times this one is when people will leave jobs. It is your values. Now, every organization I know has a set of core values. And are you communicating your core values every time you create an action plan? I know most companies have a core value of integrity. If you have a core value of integrity, are you staying honest? And one of the things that I hear from people is, well, they knew this change was coming, but they didn't give us enough information right away. Some of the organizations that go through change will say, we're being honest with you. This is what we know today. This is maybe what we're looking at for tomorrow. And they may be honest by saying, here's what I can tell you and share with you today. But other things I can't share with you because we are still exploring it. And there's some other confidentiality concerns we have. So telling people openly and honestly why you can share things and why you can't share things. So again, those values, what are your values? Right now, for conflict, I'm seeing a lot of conflict over flexibility in the workplace. Do we have opportunities to have flexibility? A lot of organizations right now are saying, well, you know what, we're remote, but now we want you to come back full. There's some conflict going on in that. Can we create a hybrid? Can we create a time in which we have everybody in the office? Do we have a common meeting hour? This is when you want to start brainstorming what can be done, even though we see things differently, but then go back to the goal. So your values become key in conflict. Well, I really think people should do this. I hear this one all the time. Lisa, if people just had common sense is a value system, but I say common sense doesn't maybe exist because we aren't all in the same environment. You know, some of us may have grown up in different situations. Some of us may have grown up in homes where we dealt with conflict by yelling. You know, the person who yells the loudest gets the resolution. We may have grown up in families where you just don't talk to people. Like I give people the silent treatment. We still don't talk to Uncle Ted, and we don't know why we don't talk to Uncle Ted. You know, again, we don't have common sense because many of us weren't raised in the same environment. We not have been in the same environment, socioeconomic status, the same environment for culture, the same environment for like rural versus big city. You know, there's a lot of different things. So when you start to say, well, people just had common sense, be careful because the common sense is your values that you may be trying to push on to somebody. There's a great book if you work with individuals who maybe are coming out of adverse situation, Ruby Payne, and it's called Bridges Out of Poverty. And it talks about the value systems between individuals who come out of poverty versus middle class versus wealth, and some of those hidden rules. And some of those hidden rules can be a source of conflict in our workplaces today. So I would encourage you to check out Bridges Out of Poverty if you work with a lot of adverse individuals and trying to understand maybe those value systems and how to see things a little bit more openly versus trying to get people to do what you want them to do based on what you believe is the correct thing. Again, know what your negotiable list is and your non-negotiable list. And be careful that if it's a non-negotiable, or excuse me, if it's a negotiable, that you're not trying to, again, push your values onto somebody. Comments, concerns, issues, problems on anything that I've shared so far, please feel free to type in the chat or, again, share any best practices by unmuting today. So my friends, we're looking at, are you a right fighter? You know, is there a right way or a wrong way? This is where sometimes our value systems come into play. You know, oftentimes the last resource, Anissa, is Bridges Out of Poverty. So again, there's times where we think our way is the best way. Do you have a right way? Do you want people to do it a certain way? Again, knowing your own belief systems as you address conflict. You know, I'll ask people, well, you go boating, which way do you tie your rope? Some people say, well, I tie it more to the left side because I got places to go and people to see. And I'll say, oh, that's interesting. Okay. Do you worry about safety? Nope, it's good. I think we're good. Somebody will say on the other side, well, you know what? I like a little more detail. I don't want my rope so dirty. I want it to be able to be focused on. Again, okay. How do we work together? They're both doing the same thing, but just different methodology. Here's another one. If you're a right fighter, I ask you, what are you getting? What's going on? If you're a right fighter, you say your way is the right way. Well, is this the right way? Is there a right way or not? Sometimes people will have big conflict over toilet paper. I used to do some marriage counseling as a part of my internship as a counselor. They fought over the dishwasher and loading the dishwasher the right way and who's supposed to load it, who's not supposed to load it. It's amazing the little things that can cause some conflict in people. And people will say, well, it's got to be that way. That's just how it is. Well, then we start to judge people based on the way we think it should be. How many of you will look at these two pictures and go, oh my God, this is just causing me frustration. Becky, right? Yeah. Somebody's saying, oh my God, these people are lazy. They don't care. We start to make assumptions about people based on some of their behaviors. Conflict happens when we start to make assumptions. And we will address conflict based on the way we're used to handling it. So that third piece, that third handout today is the Thomas Kilmann search on conflict. Are we avoiders? Are we accommodators or harmonizers? This is where people sometimes will say, well, you know what? I don't care. You just do what you need to do. How many of you have ever tried to make a decision on where to go out to eat with somebody and somebody's like, I don't care where we eat. I don't care. And then you bring up something and they're like, well, I don't really want to go there. Well, okay. If you're going to be a harmonizer, you again will agree. There's times where I've seen people go to meetings and they'll be like, yep, that sounds good. And then they get out of the meeting and they're like, I don't want to do that. Then I say, well, why did you harmonize? Why did you accommodate? Why didn't you have a conversation? Be careful with competing. Sometimes people are like, nope, it's going to be my way or the highway. You can compete when safety is involved. You can basically say, this is not a safe way to do this. This is what needs to be done. And that usually, again, safety is a non-negotiable. You can compromise by saying, hey, well, you go here and you go here. We can go here. We can go here this tonight. Or you can problem solve and collaborate. So what you might see is you might see people do the vote of 5. So when you're in a meeting and you come up with an action plan and you have a goal and you've had some conflict or some conversation around it, ask people on a scale of 1 to 5, with being 1, I'm not committed to this, to 5, I'm all in. Where is everybody at on this action plan? And if people give you a 5, 4, or 3, that basically says, okay, yep, we can make this happen. If somebody gives you a 1 or a 2, then you got to go back and have a conversation. What would it take for you to get to 3? What do we need to look at more in this plan in order to help you get on board? Only do that 2 times. And if they still stay at a 1 or a 2, then they just want to be a problem namer and not a problem solver. So if somebody's got a conflict situation and they come to you twice, and that 3rd time they come to you and they don't have a solution or don't want to think of a solution, then they just want to stay in the conflict. They have identified as being somebody who wants to be a martyr, or I just want to complain. Or sometimes people call them BMW drivers, the bitchers, the moaners, and the whiners. So again, if you have somebody who is basically staying at a 1 or a 2, and they're not saying or coming up with any solutions to get them to a 3, or if they're coming to you with a problem more than twice without a solution, then know that they want to stay stuck. That 3rd time, if somebody says 1 or 2, and that 3rd time, I'll say, well, is there anything that we can do to get you to a 3? Nope. Well, right now, the majority of us are going to get to here. This is going to be a part of the process. And we're going to ask you to accept this. So sometimes you just have to get into that assertiveness role as well, where you might have to be a little bit of a competitor if they're staying stuck and not coming up with some solutions. When you can problem solve, well, what about this? What about that? Sometimes we joke about this when we're going out to eat, on a scale of 1 to 5, give me your top. What's your 5? Well, I want to go to Texas Roadhouse. Okay. And my 5 is, well, I want to go to Indian food. Oh, okay. Let's go to the next one. Okay. What's your 2nd? What's your 3rd? My 2nd, my 3rd. Which one can we agree on? So again, sometimes you might have to do that to work through some of those little conflict pieces. So again, conflict is good when it's functional. When it's dysfunctional, That's when chaos happens. But anytime you're going into a conversation, these are some questions I ask you to consider. And again, this is in your Tough Talk handout. What assumptions are you making about this person's intentions? When you have a conflict with somebody, it's amazing the assumptions we start to make. Well, I don't think they want to do this. I think they're lazy. I don't think they have the skill set. People don't do what they're supposed to do if they don't know why they're supposed to do it, what they're supposed to do. Maybe it's a training issue, how they're supposed to do it, why they're supposed to do it. Those get in the way. And we make assumptions. And again, our assumptions, once we make that assumption, we have a bias and we start to look for reasons why we were correct. You know, how many of you have ever had somebody go into the break room after you hired somebody new and says, $10 says they don't make it to Christmas? Ugh, what assumptions are you making? Well, I just don't think they're going to be able to handle it. Well, they don't seem like they're going to be cut out for this type of environment. Well, these are an awful lot of assumptions. Robert's going back to the TP. Yep. He's making the assumption people got cats and you better not install it like over because the cats will drop it to the floor. What are your assumptions? Do you feel intimidated? Do you feel belittled? Do you feel disrespected? Do you feel marginalized? Do you feel ignored? People want to be heard and acknowledged. And if you have conflict, what are some of your assumptions? You know, I had a conflict with a colleague and automatically I thought to myself, him and I are going to see things really differently. I'm pretty bold and direct. He's pretty bold and direct. We're going to clash. And my assumption was he wasn't going to want to talk to somebody younger than him. He's been in this system for at least 30 years and he's going to think that he's right. I had a whole bunch of assumptions that I had to get rid of. I had to see him as an ally, not an enemy. What buttons are being pushed? You know, many times people will say, well, the minute somebody says something like, well, that's not my job, that's above my pay grade. Oh, my buttons go. I'm on fire right now. That is one big no-no. So what buttons are being pushed? Are you more emotional than what it needs to be? There are times where we do get emotional over stuff. And then I ask, why are you so upset about this? Why is this getting to you so much? What's your backstory? Is there a history? Well, I remember 10 years ago when this person did this and I just can't let it go. Well, you don't have to forget, but you have to forgive. You know, again, when I was working with that mortgage processor and she was having that whole list of why he was a jerk, I'm like, what's this backstory here? Come to find out that she had some issues with a former leader, a former boss who really made her feel less than. And there were certain things that this new person was saying or doing that put her back into that trauma as if she had a little bit of post-traumatic stress. And oftentimes people are like, you can have post-traumatic stress from a previous boss. Yeah, you can. You can have any type of trauma. Trauma is forced change. You can have some situations that have happened in the past that maybe you're holding on to and you don't realize you're holding on to them. And so I always encourage people, let's just move through this. So it happens. So what? We can't focus on the past. We've got to look at what do we need to do going forward. So consider some of these situations. How's your attitude towards the conversation influencing your perception of it? Oh, it's going to go really bad. This conversation is going to suck. They're going to just blow up. Well, you're setting a really good attitude for it to go that way because your attitude is setting up for failure. You know, if you're thinking to yourself, I really want this person to be successful. And this is why I want to have this conversation. This is why I want to give this feedback. I really want us as a team to be able to work together more effectively. I want our departments to be able to consider each other when we're making changes to processes. What's your attitude? And if you can get into the attitude of why you want to have this conversation, it's going to go much better. And again, asking these things. Who is your opponent? Move them out of an opponent mindset, move them into an ally. What do they need? What do they fear? What are they coming with? Try to understand a little bit more about where they're at. Are there any things that you have in common? That's when you can start to get to a yes. So as you start to look at, having some of these crucial conversations, get some of these things out of the way. Because once you start to look at ahead of time why you need to have this conversation, how you hope it to go, what do you want the outcome to look like, then you can get right into the steps of having these tough talks. Define the problem. Hey, I've noticed this. Suggest a solution. Have you ever thought about trying this? Which one of these do you think is going to work the best? Maybe, again, I can support you on this. Are there other things you'd like to try? If you can't go through and get to a good spot after those steps, then sometimes you just might have to seek mediation. But do me a favor, don't barge in and have 2 against 1. Agree to seek mediation together. Hey, it looks like you and I are at an impasse. I think sometimes we need to maybe call in somebody that's got more of an open mind here. You know, right now we're both having some pain points around this. We're both emotional around this. Maybe we need to seek somebody on the outside that can help us dialogue and so to brainstorm. Don't just automatically show up with 2 of you, because people will get into a mindset that they're being ganged up against. So focusing on, you know, what are the steps, and identify what those triggers are. What are those hot buttons going to be? And, you know, when you start to feel those hot buttons, when you start to feel yourself getting jacked up, take a minute, just, you know, you can just say, hey, you know what? I'm getting a little bit worked up right now. I just need to take a minute. Or if you're thinking to yourself, both of you are getting worked up, stop the conversation and say, it looks like you and I are both getting really upset about this right now. I want us to take some time, come back. I want to meet. I think we need an hour. Let's just take an hour. Let's process this. Let's come back, see what we can do. You can stop the meeting when things are getting overwhelmingly heated. That's called psychological safety. Or get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You know what? I have some things that I want to share with you. It's kind of making me a little bit uncomfortable, but I really think we need to do this because I want us to be here, here, and here. You can let people know you're uncomfortable. They're probably feeling the same. If you've got somebody who comes in and says, you got a minute? And you're thinking to yourself, oh gosh, okay. And they want to start telling you all the stuff that's going wrong. And you're thinking to yourself, I want to have a little bit more time to think about it. You can ask them and say, sounds like you got a lot of stuff on your mind. I really would like to think about this for a little bit. Can we come back and talk about this at 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock? That way it's giving you some time to process. Because some of my friends are, if you've ever taken a disc, some of my friends that are S's and C's don't like you to necessarily come in and knock on your door and say, do you got a minute? They want to be able to process. Now, if you have somebody who's bold and direct and maybe a D and an I, they want to get to the root cause of it really quickly. And they may be okay with that. But try to, again, have a dialogue where you're both trying to stay connected. Because the minute we get into a conversation where we start being destructive with each other's ego, with the sensitivity, we get name calling, you're done. These are some things that I've seen when I've been a mediator, where I will sit down and I'll say, okay, here's how this conversation is going to go. First of all, I'm going to give this person a chance to share his thoughts. And then I'm going to ask you to repeat back his thoughts and defend his process. Why is his process right? Then I'll ask this person, you know what? Now it's your chance. You're going to hear this person's opinion. You're going to paraphrase back what you heard and defend why his opinion is right. Just getting people into a different mindset. Oh, I can see, and this is where you can start to say, well, I can see where we have some things in common. Okay, I see that we have this strategy, this goal that I think we need to work on. And set the rules of engagement. You know, one person's going to share, the other person's not going to interrupt. We're not going to use defamatory words. We are going to stay emotionally intelligent. We're not going to blow up, deceive, lie. We're not going to personally attack. We are not going to bag. There's a lot of people that bag, and they've been storing this stuff for days and years, and all of a sudden it all comes out at one time, and it's like, you should have done this, and you didn't do this, and you don't. And the minute you start using you're into destructive conversation. So again, being able to kind of process. Yes, Anna, that has worked the best. Giving people a chance to defend the other person's opinion. It's hard for them. And sometimes you as a mediator might have to say, well, are you hearing this? Do you think this? But again, giving them that chance to be able to get that empathy, that's going to build some empathy in them. If you're destructive, it's all in the language sometimes. You know, I don't know. If the minute you say, I don't know, you're going to get into a tough conversation. You know what? These are some good questions you're asking me. Let me look into this. You know, some of the things that you're bringing up, these are falling under the non-negotiable, but here's some things that are falling under the negotiable. Let's look at what we can do. You know, I really want to be able to help you with this. So just being able to rephrase some of your conversation statements, going to help you get connected a little bit more. So staying kind of resilient that way, I think is super key and helps you. So as you're starting to look, again, empathetic language. It must be blank when blank happens. What I hear you saying is, help me understand what's happening right now. What would it take to make this happen? How would you like me to hold you accountable? Have you ever thought about? These are some uncertain times. You may be experiencing some fears. The goal is to keep you safe. What is your empathetic language? So again, being aware of those types of things. Because we all have emotions, my friends, and our emotions will drive our behaviors. Our thoughts impact how we feel. Those are our emotions. And our emotions impact how we behave. But every single situation you have is neutral until you put a story to it. So you'll see that, again, there might be a prompting event. Well, he just said this. Now I'm interpreting what I thought he said and my perception of what he said. And then I might get a physical response of, oh, I'm feeling my heart rate go up, or I'm feeling the urge to act out. I'm going to take some action and defend myself as to why he's wrong and I'm right. And the minute I defend myself, oh my gosh, I've now caused some frustration. There's some times where you can do that effectively though. Prompting event, somebody disagrees with you. Interpretation, looks like we're on two different pages. What's it going to take for us to get together? My response, I stay calm. My urge to act is to ask a question. Hey, I think you and I are on different pages. I want us to be able to be effective together. What's it going to take for us to be able to work together? Here's our action. And then we have the after effects that, okay, we can work through this. We can make this move. So questions, comments, concerns, issues, problems on anything that we've shared so far, or any advice that you want to give out? If you have any questions that you were hoping to have answered today, or if you have any scenarios or situations, please type them in the chat. A lot of times the scenarios or situations are giving feedback to somebody. That's going to be a tough conversation. I don't know how it's going to go. What if they blow up? Again, that was the second handout. That's just a quick performance. If any of you are AI users, there is a great tool with ChatGPT. If you put in a prompt, and again, ChatGPT is all about your prompt. But if you want to get a script on maybe how to have a tough dialogue, and you're like, I need to know word for word what I could do. If you put a prompt in ChatGPT and say, please create a script where I have to give feedback to an employee in regards to performance. Please give me exact phrases, wording that will not create a tough situation or generate an ego. Again, get very specific on your prompt. It will give you an actual script. And that's what, again, that second handout is. The prompt is there, and that handout comes as a part of being able to work through, what do I say? So again, please embrace your AI strategies and your usage for coming up with some conversations. And again, AI isn't 100%. You'll have to put your tone to it, yourself to it, your personality to it, but it does give you a good starting point to kind of say, okay, I have this scenario, this situation. What can I do to start? And again, that's for people who really, truly want to focus on having resolution. Sometimes many of us just want to stay in the conflict. It's I'm just going to agree to disagree, and there's nothing you can do to change it. But I'm going to tell you right now, one of the biggest things that is essential is the respect of each other. Do you want to be liked, or do you want to be respected? And again, what I'm seeing is we're losing some civility in our workplaces. We're losing some civility in our organizations. We're losing civility within our collective groups. We have to be able to respect each other. I'm going to honor you, and I'm going to do my best to have mutual respect. I'm not going to minimize you or judge you. I want to stay open-minded to have some of these conversations. You know, so many times people are like, don't talk about politics or religion. No, let's learn how to have good conversations around politics and religion so that we don't get to an impasse and we don't become destructive with each other. And we can respect and say, I realize that this is your point. Here's my point. Are we ever going to be able to agree on this, or do we have to just agree to disagree? And we will agree to disagree respectfully. Listening to various points, working towards mutual decisions. And again, how do I start? You know, these are great sentence starters. I have something I'd like to discuss with you. I think it's going to help us work together more effectively. I really want to talk to you about this first, but I want to get your point of view. Help me understand where you're coming from. You know, I need help with what just happened. You got a couple minutes. Hey, what did you do? What did you try? What worked? What didn't work? What would you do different next time? That's the one I love the best. If somebody's doing something different than I normally would do, I'll say, hey, you know what? What'd you do? Help me understand. And what worked for you? And what do you think you could have done different so this doesn't happen again? You've now jumped into a crucial conversation as a coach, and you're not jumping in saying, well, you did that wrong. You should have done this. Again, my goal is to never should on somebody. My goal is to say, hey, that's interesting. Okay, help me understand why you did it this way. What do you think it would take for you to do it this way? What did you learn? What could you take away? And any of those types of things, you get into that good constructive resolution. Be accepting sometimes of a compromise. You know, I always like to say, what are your deal breakers? Let people know what your deal breakers are. Like, I'm going to compromise up to this point, but this point, this is a deal breaker. This is a non-negotiable. Again, what's my negotiable list? What's my non-negotiable list? Be flexible, be willing to bend if you need to, and ask yourself, am I getting more jacked up than I need to be? Can I live with this? You know, be honest with your needs. I've met so many people who are passive aggressive. That's fine. Fine stands for feelings inside, not expressed. And if somebody says, well, that's fine, I always want to dive deeper. I really do. I want to say, okay, it's by you giving me a fine, are you really fine? Or are you just not feeling like you're being heard or understood? Cooperate towards a solution. The big thing is be careful not to change the subject. I've met people who have started a good conversation. They were doing all the right things. And then the other person started to get heated. They panicked and then they changed the subject. Be okay with being uncomfortable. That's the old saying, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And you're going to have emotions. I can see you're getting really upset right now. My goal is not to make you upset. My goal is to help us work together more efficiently. What do we need to do to continue this conversation? Because I don't want it to be destructive. I don't want either one of us to walk out of here being more angry than we were when we came in. What do we need to do? So again, that emotional intelligence is key. What do we need to do? Now, another great book I would encourage you to get is called Appreciative Inquiry. And these are some, again, tools coming out of appreciative inquiry. So I would encourage you to check that out. Crucial Conversations. There's audiobooks, there's scenarios, all those different types of things. But the biggest thing they talk about is cultivate an attitude of discovery. Stephen Covey talks about it in his books. Seek first to understand before being understood. Pretend like you don't know anything. And then watch body language. Because we say a lot without saying anything at all. And one of the biggest things too is do not interrupt. I hear a lot of people say, yeah, but. Don't say, yeah, but. That's interesting. Okay. Here's what I heard you say. Whatever you do, don't take it personal. Sometimes people are like, oh, I have to take it personal. They're attacking me. They're attacking the behavior. Please don't blame the person, blame the behavior. And again, blame the situation. You might have to acknowledge it. Just repeat back what you heard them say. Explain back to them what you think they're asking for. This is what I'm trying to do. And that is, again, what I do with trying to have the other person defend the other person's idea. That's just that acknowledgement. And then that advocacy. You know, sometimes where you're going to have to say, you know what, I can see where you could feel that way. There's some times where I just have to apologize. I'll just say, you know what, maybe I didn't explain that as best as I thought I did. My apologies. Or maybe I wasn't as clear on my expectations as I could have been. That's why we're having the conversation, especially if you're giving performance feedback. Sometimes I'll say, maybe I wasn't as clear as I was hoping to be on expectations. I would just want to re-educate you on what's important and why this is a non-negotiable. So again, that advocacy, and then problem solve, problem solve, problem solve. What are the things that we need to keep doing, stop doing, or start doing? And if it gets difficult, then we have to just say, what are our rules of engagement? So crucial conversations, a great tool. I would encourage you to take that into account, but then also look at your decision-making strategies. Sometimes you're just going to maybe have to command some things. Hey, you know what? This was the decision. Here's what was made. What's it going to take for you to do this? There's going to be some times where you want to consult. Okay, this decision was made. This is, again, what we're going to do for the next 3 months. We may come back and look at it and how we can shift it to be 1% better. So when I'm asking for input, I'll consult and say, hey, from this perspective, we've been doing this. What do you see as an opportunity to be 1% better? Your consultations are your continuous improvement teams. Maybe you have to vote, all in favor, say aye. And then we have to have consensus. That's where that 1 to 5, everybody's got to be a 3, 4, or 5. What's it going to take for us to all get to 3, 4, or 5? And then how do you decide? Who cares about it? Who knows about it? Who must agree with it? And how many people is it actually worth involving? Sometimes with conflict, we involve too many people. I remember people would come in and say, well, Jill and I and Joe and John, and we all think that Bill needs to be fired. Oh, okay. So all these people, they bring in the whole posse and they want to tell me all the reasons why they think this person should be fired. Okay. Let's just get to the root cause of the issue. Who do you actually have the problem with? Who actually has the problem with Bill? And then what do we need to do? Because sometimes people like to rally the troops. And when they rally the troops, they bring it all to your table. And then you have to say, okay, this is a difficult conversation. What do we need to do? Who actually has the situation? Where do we go? And if you've got difficult behaviors that you have to have some conversations around, try to be positive. Don't make excuses. I've noticed some things. Your attendance isn't as good as it should be. I want to have a conversation on what we can do to help you because I want you to be successful here. I can see you're upset. I really want to help you. Help me understand what's going on. You know what? I want to try to resolve this issue quickly. What are some things you think you could do? What can I do to hold you accountable? Try to stay calm. Try to stay objective. And please do me a favor. Have your crucial conversations in private areas. You don't need an audience. But the biggest thing is determine the cause. Sometimes the actual behavior somebody is doing isn't the actual root cause. There are 2 emotions that everybody has, anger and fear. And they will also have love and faith. So if somebody's constantly angry all the time, well, it's because of this. Make sure that truly is the reason why they're angry all the time. Determine that cause and listen actively. What I'm hearing you say is, a lot of times I go into companies and the biggest place where you have conflict in your organizations, I swear to God, is in your break rooms. I don't know what it is about break rooms, but there's always all these signs like, this is a self-cleaning kitchen, clean up after yourself. There's always big signs on the refrigerator. This is not a science experiment location. Take your crap home by Friday. I mean, it's the negative language and it's always in the break room. It's causing some conflict. And I'm like, oh my gosh, we got to come up with a solution. What do we need to do? And then everybody's like, well, just get everybody to pick up after themselves. Well, then we all have to figure out what that needs to take. So again, what's it going to take? What do we need to do? This is, if we're going to have this negative language, it's going to definitely create more negativity. So this is a non-negotiable. So again, what do we need to do to keep doing, stop doing, or start doing to have a great culture? And if you've got some people who have unrealistic expectations, again, I know you're upset with this. I can see you're frustrated with this. It sounds like you are not liking this type of thing, but if you don't do this, here's what you can have happen. If you do this, this is what you can have happen. We call that motivational interviewing. Okay. If you keep doing what you're doing, if you keep calling in sick, if you keep avoiding these meetings, if you keep sabotaging your department, you can expect this to have happen. Maybe if you change one thing, maybe if you, set your alarm different. Maybe if you had a backup plan, if your alarm doesn't go off, maybe you send a representative to the meeting and bring back notes to be able to work and process, whatever, offer solutions. But again, create ideas where we can kind of work together. If you've got somebody who just wants to argue with you, I'm hearing what you're saying. I can see where this would be tough. Here's what I think we can do. If they get blatantly arguing and you're thinking to yourself, man, I need to de-escalate this person, take a breath. And you can be, you know what, you're getting really worked up right now. I want us to be able to have a good conversation. Are you going to be able to stay okay so we can come up with a solution? Do you need to take a minute and come back when we can actually have a good constructive conversation? Because I do not want us to stand here screaming and yelling at each other. But that requires you to also have good emotional intelligence. So you may have somebody who's just an arguer. And remember, we learn how to deal with conflict as kids. So we might come from an environment where we just argue. We might have that person that just blows up immediately. The minute you say something, they just blow up. Well, just let them vent. Don't interrupt. And just prepare your posture to be pretty open. I can see why this would be frustrating for you. It must be hard. Looks like you're getting pretty emotional about this. Here's what we're doing. Here's why we're doing it. What do you think it's going to take for you to do this? If you've got some people who are know-it-alls, well, we've been doing this forever. This is how we always done it. You know what? I realize that you've got a lot of great knowledge right now, but here's the change we want. I would love for us to try it my way or try it our way first. And then you can come back and be a part of the continuous improvement team. Because you know what? I know you have knowledge. You've done this for a while. You'll be able to see maybe where we have some growth. Put them again on a pilot project. Put them in your continuous improvement teams. Get them on that focus where, you know, they facilitate maybe a keep doing, stop doing. And then follow up. If you've got angry people, follow up with them the next day. Hey, you know, I know this might have been tough. This yesterday's conversation, you know, I know it was kind of hard, but I just want to check in today. Are we okay? Can we continue to move forward? Follow up with them. Don't ignore them after you have that tough talk. I always like to say, follow up with them within 24 hours. Hey, I know this was a tough conversation yesterday, but again, I just want us to be able to work together more effectively. What do we need to do to continue to move forward? So that is so important. So I love it. Robert, your wife teaching you to, you know, things get really excited, just show no emotion, sit there for about 10 seconds. Yeah, we call that therapeutic silence. So if somebody's getting jacked up, just sit there and stay present. And again, you can head nod or you can just, you know, move forward, but 10 seconds is very, very powerful. Most people don't like silence and they'll freak out at about 7 seconds and they'll say something. If you can wait 10 seconds, awesome. So that's a great piece of advice, Robert. So as you're looking at these things, again, start with your heart. These are coming out of crucial conversations again. Stay focused on what you really do want. See people as your ally, not your enemy. Take an attitude of curiosity. And then notice if safety is being at a risk. If you start to notice when you're having these conversations where people are bulking up or they're becoming more subdued, watch for that. Make it safe. Be non-judgmental. Stay in your dialogue, especially if somebody's getting upset. Or if somebody starts to say, well, you never told me this. Nobody ever told me that. Well, you know what? I'm sorry that that's happened, but we want to be able to move forward from this. So what do we need to do today to move forward? Sometimes in HR, we call that, so what, now what? So again, you know, what do you need to do to continue to move forward? State your path. Speak persuasively. I really want us to get to here. What's it going to take? And then just know, I want to explore other people's paths and then move to action. So again, I would highly recommend reading Crucial Conversations or also Radical Candor. Radical Candor is not another big, great tool to use. But how are you when you're having the conversation? What are you saying? You drive it sometimes as the leader who starts the conversation. Watch your own energy. Take Robert's wife's advice to wait 10 seconds. Stay and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Maybe voice, you know, I know this might be tough, but I want us to get through this. You know, I'm a little bit uncomfortable having the conversation. I'm sure you're a little bit uncomfortable having this conversation too. What do we need to do? And I always encourage people, if you need to, practice the conversation prior. But please make sure you honor confidentiality. You know, confidentiality is a huge source of conflict. And people are like, I don't trust you because you did this, this, and this. If you don't have trust, you will always have conflict. But you can have healthy conflict when you have trust if you keep things confidential. So again, practice a conversation with somebody, but keep the names out of it. And try to keep the situations to a minimum so that people can't decide or determine who you're talking about when you are keeping them neutral. So those are just some tips and tricks on really how to have some great conversations. Again, I would love to hear any advice that you have that you say, hey, you know, I think this has worked really well, or these are some things that people have taught me, just like Robert gave us some advice from his wife. I'm going to stop the share. And if anybody wants to chime in on things that you found that have worked, or things that you say, yeah, this is something that's definitely beneficial, please feel free to type in the chat, or today you can unmute and share your thoughts. Again, my friends, those 3 handouts are there for you. If there's anything I can do to support you in the future, please feel free to reach out. Megan is also available as a resource at Kirkwood. If there's anything that I can do to help support you in your own organization or any group coaching or things like that, please reach out to Megan, and we can certainly connect with some strategies to help you have those conversations. So thanks so much for allowing me the opportunity to share some tips and tricks that have worked for me. And I'm hoping that you all continue to focus on the things you're doing well and how do you continue to make those 1% better, because that will keep you in a mindset that conflict is good and we'll make changes when we learn enough or we heard enough. So thanks so much for being here. And Megan, I'll turn it back over to you, my friend.
Thank you, Lisa. I always love your presentations. They're so fun. Now is a great time still to ask any questions if any of you have them. I did launch a very cool, just 4 questions I really hope you'll take the time to answer before you head back toward the day. I have gotten a lot of questions lately about whether or not these are recorded. In case you have to jump off or miss it, just know that all our webinars are always recorded. They're one of the few trainings that we do record. So I will send those out. I'll send that link out to you probably sometime in the next couple of days, and it will go up on our YouTube channel. So if you ever have to join us and jump off, just know you won't miss anything. All right. Well, seeing no questions, Lisa, thanks again so much for your time. Oh, Robert says he's echoing through my speakers. Oh, I am. Anybody else? Well, don't worry. I'm wrapping up. Thank you all for joining us. Head back to your work day. We're here if you need anything. Thank you again.